One of the most exciting cameras to be announced this year is this bad boy right here, the Canon C50. And as a longtime Canon user, I was really excited about this camera. It gave me everything I wanted in a small cinema camera, including an excellent top handle, double XLR, time code, open gate, and tons of great features. But one feature that was missing that everyone was a little upset about is IBIS. So this camera does not have any internal body stabilization. And for some solo shooters and people who like to handhold their camera like this, IBIS is really, really helpful. And a lot of Canon's reasoning was that if you're gonna use this on a gimbal or on a car mount or in a lot of different rigged up situations, IBIS is actually detrimental to the final image. And as someone who uses cameras with IBIS, including the Lumix S1 II, which is filming right now, I have seen the limitations of IBIS, especially when you're following characters walking or running, where you'll see the actual IBIS mechanism hit the limits of where it can move, and therefore you get a little jitter and snap back into place from the IBIS system. Obviously with the Canon, you're not gonna get that because there is no IBIS. However, when you're hand-holding, like Elliot is doing right now while filming me, the footage is beautifully smooth. And if you're hand-holding this without IBIS, you're gonna get a lot of those micro jitters, especially on a cold day like this, where my hands are a little bit shaky. But Canon did tout the fact that their electronic stabilization has vastly improved, and it got me thinking, do we really need IBIS anymore if the electronic stabilization in camera is as good and you don't have the limitations that IBIS gives you? So we came out here to find out. So we have the Panasonic Lumix S1 II, the king of full frame IBIS, versus this, the Canon C50 and its electronic image stabilization, to see if we really need IBIS or if the electronic stabilization is good enough. It's also just a good opportunity to put these two cameras head to head, because the C50 and the Panasonic S1 II are really two of the best small-bodied video cameras you can buy right now. So we'll also be taking a look at image quality, usability, codec options, and much more. So the Panasonic S1 II and the Canon C50 actually have quite a bit in common. They both have robust internal codecs. They also both shoot in open gate 3x2. The Canon C70 has a 7K sensor, so that's in 7K, and the 6K sensor records in 6K 3x2. No matter which camera you choose, the image quality is going to be incredible. So though there are a lot of different codec options, I want to make sure I match these up as close as possible. So we're going to use the 10-bit 422 4K mode, which is downsampling from the 7K and the 6K sensors. All right, but the main reason we're out here freezing our butts off is so that we can test stabilization. So the first test we're going to be doing is a walking test. I'll just be following Elliot as he walks down this snowy pathway, and we'll be using the IBIS on the Panasonic S1 II and then the electronic stabilization on the C50. All right, this is the Canon C50 with standard electronic image stabilization. And walk. Panasonic S1 II, body stabilization only, and walk. Now, stabilization is great when you are walking or running or doing any sort of movement, but for a documentary filmmaker like me, often you just want great stabilization when you're filming someone talking to another character or just looking off into the distance. And so just hand holding a camera in front of you, hopefully with some port. You usually use a SAC or a monopod or something like that, but you still want to have a nice stable image. And so let's do a quick standing and talking test. We'll also be doing this in front of my Blurple Tacoma, and so it'll be a good color test as well. All right, so the next test is going to be our car mount test. And this is one of the main reasons that Canon decided not to put IBIS in the Canon C50. So that if you're using 3 or 4 C50s in a crash cam situation or something like an F1 movie, then you won't have any IBIS jiggle. And so we're actually gonna put that to the test and mount the S1 II to the windshield here and film me driving down this snowy road. And then we'll switch it out for the C50 and see which one performs better. The S1 II just overheated on me. Just kidding, it's 20 degrees out here. So for situations like this, the C50 is actually pretty darn great because it has 4 mounting points on the body outside of the tripod plate, whereas the S1 II doesn't have any. And so if you do want to mount the S1 II in any of these types of situations, you're going to have to get a cage for it. And here we have the small rig full cage. Also, when doing car mounts, it's nice to have as many points of contact as possible to keep the image as stable as possible. So maybe 2 or 3 different suction cups and actually having different NATO rails or whatever contraption you want to hold these things steady. But we're just going to do one on this trip to really put these cameras to the test. And so first up is the S1 II. So this is the Panasonic S1 II with body image stabilization on, as well as standard electronic image stabilization. See if that helps a little bit. Should do it. All right, so now we have the Canon C50 on the car mount, and this is with all stabilization turned off. So if you're using a car mount, you may not want any stabilization. And so we have it off on the C50. Let's see how it looks. So the one really nice thing about the Canon C50 is the RF mount. And the reason for that is that in the RF mount, Canon puts stabilization in tons of their lenses. And so if you're buying a zoom lens from Canon to go with the C50, it's going to have stabilization, whether it's the 24-70, the 24-105, 2.8 or f4 version, or pretty much anything in between. But it's not just the zoom lenses that have IS built in. A lot of their primes do as well, including their 24mm 1.8, 35 1.8, and 85mm f2. And so even if you didn't have a body with IBIS like the C50, you could buy 3 or 4 lenses, have some really nice primes, some beautiful zooms, and have stabilization throughout your range. Now, when you're looking at something like the L mount or even the Sony E mount, it's a different story. A lot of the faster zooms in those lineups don't have image stabilization at all. If you want image stabilization, you're either going with the super telephotos like your 100 to 500 millimeters, your 70 to 200s, or your 24 to 105 f4s. So you're going to be sacrificing speed and focal length for stabilization. And when it comes to the prime lenses, it's also a completely different story. As far as I know, there isn't a single Panasonic, Sigma, or Leica prime lens that has IBIS built into it. So if you want to use some of those beautiful f1.4 or f1.8 primes, then you're going to have to solely rely on the in-body stabilization. So after viewing all of the footage, I think it's still clear that IBIS is still really useful. And the fact that Panasonic makes the best in the business is also really helpful for something like the S1 II or the S1 II. But the C50 has a ton going for it, including an incredible top handle and audio module, a really nice form factor, tons of mounting points, and the internal fans that allow the body to run cool even in hot weather conditions. So if you're gonna shoot like I do, which is a lot of long documentary days, you're gonna want the fans and you're gonna want the audio modules and you're going to want the form factor of the Canon cinema camera from the C50. But if you do a lot of run and gun or starting and stopping and not worried about overheating in 20-degree weather and want the best stabilization on the market, then that's still the Panasonic S1 II. And of course, there are ways to mitigate the lack of image stabilization in the C50 by using any of the Canon RF lenses that have stabilization built in. But if all you're doing with the Canon C50 is shooting stationary objects and you yourself are not moving the camera, then the electronic image stabilization works really well. And I love using it with something like this 35mm Canon lens or the Zeiss Otis lenses, which I love a lot. But if you are walking with the camera, then I do think the electronic image stabilization still creates sort of a weird artifact as you're walking. And in that regard, I think the IBIS actually still looks a little bit better. So depending on the type of shooting you do, whether you use a lot of primes and especially cinema primes, maybe the Panasonic S1 II is the better bet to have that stabilized footage. But if you're doing a lot of documentary work and you have zoom lenses with stabilization in them, then perhaps the Canon C50 is the better route. But the nice thing is there are a lot of different options: lens IBIS, electronic image stabilization, even warp stabilizer in post, that could potentially get you the stable footage that you want. So test out a bunch of different ones, watch videos like this, and let me know in the comments below which stabilization method you prefer. All right, we'll see you in the next video.